Welcome to the Slow Living Collective podcast. I'm Amy, wife, mother of two and devoted homemaker. Join me on this journey as we explore the beauty of slow and simple living, where life unfolds at its own unhurried pace. I'll take you through my experiences of slowing down, tending to our allotment plot, finding joy in the little things and making the most of our small home. Together we'll learn to live in harmony with the ever-changing seasons, discovering the magic that lies in embracing the present moment. So let's embark on this enriching adventure towards a more intentional and fulfilling life. Hey everyone, and welcome back to another episode of the Slow Living Collective podcast. I'm Amy and I'm so excited to have you here today because we're diving into something that I know a lot of you have wondered at some point or another. Is slow living just another way to be lazy? Now I know what you might be thinking, especially with all the buzz around hustle culture, productivity hacks and all these go mindsets. We live in a world that practically glorifies busy, and it's no surprise that slow living can sometimes get a bit of a bad rap. It's because we've been conditioned to believe that if we're not constantly working or running from one task to the next or crossing things off some never-ending to-do list, then maybe we're doing something wrong. But I'm going to tell you this right out of the gate. Slow living is not lazy. In fact, it winds me up to high heaven when I see people say something along the lines of like, oh, I'm having a lazy day this morning and a slow morning. And it's like, it's not lazy. It's not lazy. It's normal. It's normal. So it's not lazy. It's the complete opposite of that. And throughout this episode, we're going to explore why. We're going to unpack why slowing down doesn't mean you're unproductive and how living in tune with the seasons actually makes this way of life the easiest and more fulfilling. So, you heard me right. It's easier than rushing through life and being burnt out. So, let's do it. Let's chat about how slow living can help you find more peace, more purpose, and more presence in your everyday life. Because trust me, it's not as complicated as it seems. And you might just find that slowing down is the key to living a fuller life. So how about that? Right, before we dive into the rest of the episode, I want to ask you guys who are building your own businesses or have ever thought about building a business or making money online. I want to ask you, are you ready to slow down? Slow down with your business and build it a little more intentionally without overwhelm. Because I created the Slow Business Bundle just for you. It is a collection of resources that are designed to help you simplify your business practices, align them with your values, and make progress at a pace that feels right for you and for you alone. It is packed filled with PDFs, with guides, ebooks, checklists, you name it. Tips, tools, guidance. It's going to support you in creating a business that is both fulfilling and sustainable. So if you're tired of hustling and you want to run your business on your own terms, get your copy of the Slow Business Bundle. There is so much inside. You are going to love it. So you can find it at theslowlivingcollective.com/slowbusinessbundle. That's theslowlivingcollective.com/slowbusinessbundle. Okay, right, let's dive into the rest of the episode and let's break it down and start with the basics. What is slow living really? Now, you've probably heard the term tossed around, but it can mean a lot of things to different people. And for me, slow living is all about being intentional with my time, my energy. It's about choosing to slow down, not in the sense of doing less, but just focusing on what truly matters to me. So slow living is intentionally slowing down, embracing simplicity, creating more space to connect with your life. It is about having more meaningful moments with people that you love, appreciating the little things, allowing yourself to be more present. And it's just being in a way that we often miss when we're too busy running around. And it's not about dropping everything and doing nothing. It is about doing what matters more. It is where the magic happens, I promise you. And I know you're thinking, I have a busy life, I have tons of things I have to do, I have a job, I have school runs, I have, kids in school, you don't have those things, Amy. Why are you sitting here telling me about this? And, I just want to say, well, I have kids, but I home educate them. they're not in school, but they still have plenty of things. Home education is not sitting at home and doing nothing. We have classes, we have extracurriculars, I run my own business, I do this podcast. My life might not look like the default of two parents working in 9-to-5 jobs, PAYE jobs, children in school runs, extracurriculars and stuff like that. But it doesn't mean that it's not busy. It's just busy in a different way. So when we slow down, like I said, it is where the magic happens. And I want to kind of debunk the idea that slow living is lazy, because they often seem to go hand in hand. Well, the world we live in is fast. We're constantly bombarded by this idea that we need to be on 24/7, whether it's work, social media, personal obligations. Our culture just loves the grind, the hustle, and this relentless pursuit of productivity. And somewhere along the way, we've started to think that being busy is like the badge of honor, right? And that if we're not constantly doing something, then we're probably falling behind. But slow living isn't about rejecting everything. It's not about being lazy or unproductive. It's just changing your thought process. It's changing a mindset. It's about making conscious decisions about where to put your time and energy. And sometimes that means slowing down. You get to decide what's worth your attention and what isn't. And so let's dive into this big misconception about slow living, because many people confuse slow with lazy. When you hear slow living, you might immediately think like, oh, she's talking about lounging around all day and doing nothing in her pajamas. But that couldn't be further from the truth, because slow living is not about doing less for the sake of doing less. It's about creating more space in our life for doing what matters, finding that balance between work and rest, doing, being. And so when you slow down, you're actually making room to nurture relationships and be more present and do things that fuel you. It's so far from laziness, right? The truth is, in slow living, you're actually being more productive, but in a much more healthier and more fulfilling way. Because when you're intentional about where you spend your energy, you can actually give yourself more in the areas that count. And that's where balance comes in, because we've been really conditioned to equate productivity and busyness. Think about it like this. When we're busy, we feel like we're accomplishing something. But are we really? Or are we just checking boxes and burning out in the process? Because let's be honest, a lot of us actually put things on our to-do list that we've already done, so we get the satisfaction of crossing them off, because then we feel like we've achieved something. So are we being more productive, or are we just feeling like we're being more productive? Because here's the thing, slow living isn't about doing less to achieve nothing. It's about creating more of a balance, making those intentional decisions about where and how you show up in the world. And mostly it's just about living on your own terms. It's about choosing what deserves your energy and what doesn't. And the best part about that is you get to decide for yourself, instead of letting the world's definition of busy dictate to you. So so often I sometimes feel like when I'm talking about slow living, I'm like, it feels so wishy-washy, like it's it will look different for everyone. And sometimes I think people are like, no, give me like a step-by-step framework how I need to do this. How do I do it? And like, I have created things that do have a step-by-step framework. Like you'll be able to get my step-by-step framework rooted in seasons when it's live, but you can also use my smaller 3-step framework in my slow and simple workshop to get you started. So you can have a bit of a framework or guidance, let's say, on how you can start and what you need to do and mindset shifts, etc., but ultimately it will always look different when you have, I was going to say completed it. You're not going to complete it, but when you start embracing the life you want to live, it will look different for everybody, because everybody has different priorities, and that's the most important thing to remember. But slow living allows you to cut through all of the noise in this big busy world and just get clear on really matters to you. So it's not lazy, it's intentional, and it's about creating a life that aligns with what you truly value, and that's where freedom and peace come from. So when you slow down, you get to take control of your life and live on your own terms. So let's dive a little more into why it's absolutely not lazy, because the big old misconception that slowing down equates to doing less is so widespread, and I want to show you how living slowly is actually one of the most intentional, thought out and fulfilling ways to live. So let's say it again. Let's set the record straight here. Slow living is not about doing less. It is about doing with purpose. It is about being intentional with the energy that you put into everything you do. So imagine your energy as like a bank account, right? So every day you're either making deposits into it or withdrawals, whether that's through work or family life, your personal time, friendships, relationships, whatever. When you live more intentionally, you are choosing to make thoughtful, meaningful deposits. You are choosing where to focus your energy, and that is a much more sustainable approach than hustling and running on empty all the time. So think for a moment about all the times where you've slowed down to focus on one thing at a time, whether that's a project or spending time with a friend or just taking a break for yourself. When you give something your full attention, it becomes better. Maybe your work improves. Maybe your relationship or friendships deepen. You have more of a sense of fulfillment. You are no longer just checking off tasks for the sake of it. You're engaging with something at a much deeper level, and it is so much more rewarding than the chaos of constant busyness. But living intentionally does take thought and effort and mindfulness, because it is not how we have necessarily been raised in the modern world, and it just takes a little more thought is all. You're going to move away from the living by default, and you are going to be living with more intention, and it's about considering what's more important to you and taking action on those things. So it's not about being lazy or sitting back and letting life pass you by. It is an active decision to live with more intention. That's the opposite of laziness. It is the exact opposite, because living mindfully, it is not the default. So it requires some effort. It's not hard, but it does require effort. And it requires you bringing yourself back to it. And it demands presence in a world that is constantly pulling us in a lot of different directions. And speaking of presence, when we slow down, we are really able to give ourselves the opportunity to be more present. And let me tell you, that is powerful. But I want to remind you that it is impossible to be present all of the time. So I don't want you to chastise yourself over that when you're like, oh gosh, I'm not being present again. You can bring yourself back. It's, it can't be an all the time thing, and it's, again, a muscle. You're going to have to flex it. So while presence is great and you can use the power of presence to really connect with people, and it will help, don't feel bad if you can't always achieve it. It's not always going to be possible. I promise you, you're not doing anything wrong. And I think out of presence comes setting boundaries, but also creating space as well. I think oftentimes people think like slow living is like doing a set of tasks and you'll get to this arbitrary point, but it's more of that. Like, it's just your lifestyle. It's changing your lifestyle, and you're going to have to start slowly with that. But it's also about setting boundaries, because you are going to change slightly from the world around you. You are going to want to create space for the things that matters. And, boundaries sound scary, but they're actually great because they help protect your energy, your time, your mental space. And without boundaries, life can feel very overwhelming, and it can feel very overwhelming quite fast as well. So when you start to think about being more intentional, you will naturally begin to establish those boundaries. Like, it's the same with living seasonally as well. And an example of that is in the winter, we often feel a lot slower, more tired, like we want to hibernate a bit more, a bit like nature. And so in the winter, if we had lots of people saying, oh, let's get together Tuesday, let's do this on Thursday, a lot of social obligations can feel a lot for us in the winter, and it was natural for us to say, actually, do you know what? No. In winter it doesn't work for me, and setting that boundary is completely fine. And that's something I noticed before as well. Through winter in previous years, before I started living more seasonally, I realised I was saying yes to everything and just trying to do all the things, being constantly busy. And then I was just exhausted because, of course, it's winter and I needed to slow down. So, in the years since, I've taken a step back. I keep my schedule a lot lighter in the winter, and I just start being more intentional with my time. And as a result of that, I just feel so much more present and aligned with what I'm looking for and what I want. And I have more energy to give to the things that matter. And, I take time for rest. I don't feel like I'm burning out. And that's the thing. Setting a boundary can be really, really helpful. So, I think creating space as well for the things that we want is just as important. And, going back to this idea of slow living being lazy, it all ties into this making a conscious choice, showing up with intention, being fully present, living in alignment with the seasons. And, I think it seems like it's difficult at first, but once you create space for what matters, it feels so much better. So why do people think slow living is lazy in the first place? And I think it comes from, living in today's fast-paced world where success is so often measured by how much we can accomplish in almost the shortest amount of time possible. So I think slow living, it just, as a concept, can sometimes seem at odds with everything we've been taught about productivity. Society, let's be honest, has conditioned us to equate busyness with success, and slowing down can feel counterproductive to that message. I think, from such an early age, we're bombarded with this message that being busy equals being important or being successful. We're told the more we do, the more value we bring to the world. It's this idea, it's reinforced through school, through work, everything, just life, where hustle culture is celebrated and, stories of non-stop achievement are really glorified, I guess. And I think our culture teaches us to fill every moment with activity, to be constantly on the move, to hustle constantly. And, we hear phrases like time is money, don't stop till you're proud, the grind never stops, etc. And these messages suggest that productivity is a sign of our worth, and that resting or slowing down or pausing is a luxury for either those who have made it or those who are lazy. And it just reinforces this idea that we should always be striving to achieve more and leaves no room for anything else. And so I think there's a common thread sometimes, that either slow living is just people not doing enough, an excuse to do nothing, or questioning how do you get anything done. And I think these arise from almost a fundamental misunderstanding of what slow living actually is, and they're really rooted in a mindset that links motion with progress and sees rest or reflection as just a waste of time. But in reality, like I've said, slow living is not about doing less in a way that leads to stagnation or something like that. It's about doing what matters more thoughtfully and with more intention and with more depth rather than speed. And they just arise from a misunderstanding or a lack of understanding, I guess, where people fear change. People fear that if they slow down, they're going to lose their edge, they're going to fall behind, people are going to think they're lazy, they're not going to meet their societal expectations, blah, blah, blah. And, for many people as well, I think slowing down just represents uncertainty, and our culture really doesn't tolerate uncertainty very well. It likes certainty and measurable results. And I think, when you talk about slowness and living more intentionally, I don't think people really know what you're talking about. As if you're living like passively or lazily or with a lack of any kind of effort. I think they just don't understand it, and then therefore they don't grasp that it requires, actually there's more deepness to it, let's say, because it's not about avoiding work or being lazy. And I think that's just a narrative that really needs challenging. Because, laziness, of course, exists, but I would say laziness is like a lack of action, and making a choice to avoid your responsibilities or your work or, something like that, where slowness, on the other hand, it's about choosing to live with intention, about aligning your actions with your values, making really thoughtful decisions. And, it requires more. It's about prioritizing our self-care, about prioritizing balance in our life. So I can understand why people would think it's lazy if they have no idea what they're talking about. But really, slow living is actually intentional action. And I say this in so many episodes, I've said it so many times in this episode, it's not about doing less, but about doing more of what matters intentionally, and just not rushing through tasks just for the sake of it or to check them off a list, and just to give our full attention to the things that are really important to us and make room for more reflection and connection and clarity. And I think it leads to us being better humans, and I think it leads to us, being able to connect with ourselves better and ultimately make better decisions, make the things we actually do a bit more meaningful. And I think many people find when they slow down, they actually become more productive because they start focusing on the right things rather than just all the things and it just being an excuse to check off a to-do list. And I think when you are more intentional, you don't spread yourself so thin, and you just do things that matter. And I think actually I just feel like you have better quality in your life. I don't know. But, we do live in a world that prioritizes speed, achievement, productivity, and it can be really difficult to switch that mindset. And I think a lot of people feel guilty for switching that mindset as well. But I wanted to leave you, I guess, with some practical tips on how you can embrace slow living without feeling guilty. I actually did an Instagram story poll a couple of weeks ago, and something like 39% of people said that the biggest challenge they have with slowing down is they feel guilty about slowing down, and that's huge. The only other one that beat that was that people think that they are too busy to slow down. So let's dive into it. Let me go through some practical tips so you can start slowing down without feeling guilty. So starting small is the best thing you can do. I think one of the biggest misconceptions about slow living is it requires this massive overnight transformation, and I think people are frightened that they're going to have to change their entire life. You don't need to do that. You don't need to flip your life upside down or quit your job. It's about making small intentional changes that really add up over time. So that might be integrating slow living into your daily routine. So find how you can incorporate it into your schedule already. So maybe instead of picking up your phone when you wake up, you spend like a couple of minutes just sitting quietly or having a cup of coffee or just doing some breathing just for a couple of minutes. I promise you there is space for it. You have to make it, but there is space for it. And another thing is, you can weave that into your day just as much as you can into your morning. Maybe it's stepping away from your desk for a few minutes, going for a walk on your lunch break, just closing your eyes, doing some quick mindful breathing. It doesn't have to be like an hour long. It can be a couple of minutes. And also just set aside specific times in your day or in your evening for some things that you enjoy. Maybe it might be reading or journaling. Maybe you just want to sit in silence after the kids have gone to bed. But these little moments of pausing just can help you reconnect with yourself and just give your brain a bit of a break from the constant stimulation that the world offers. But also, I want you to think about your time. How can you use your time more intentionally? Just think about a few areas in your life where you can slow down and be more intentional. So if you're a parent like me, it might be creating some intentional moments with your children where you're fully present and not distracted by your phone, the television, you may be cooking dinner, something like that. If you work from home, maybe block out periods of the day where you can just work without interruption, followed by intentional breaks. This is something I do. I have to work very much in like the crevices of time, but I do set aside one evening per week where I work from 5 until around 10 o'clock. This big stretch of time. I would not necessarily agree with what I'm about to say here. I eat at my desk, which I don't advise, but my time is a little different. I don't get breaks, right? But my time is different. Like, that is a stretch of time that I commit to, and the family commits to, that I can work on my business. Everything else is on an ad hoc basis, let's say. So I block out that period of time where I work without interruption, and but then I take intentional breaks other than that, and that prevents this cycle of non-stop work that can feel really overwhelming. So it really just helps if you can plan your days with a bit more space, and around those non-negotiables, where can you find space in your schedule? And I think it probably goes without saying, like, we're not looking for perfection. Perfection's out. We're not going for perfection. So if you're looking to do it perfectly, stop. But like I said, a lot of people say that they feel guilty. So this is going to sound really silly. This reminds me of like when I say to my husband, I feel really anxious about whatever. And he says to me, just don't worry. And I'm like, oh, I wish I'd thought of that myself. So I'm going to say, when I was talking about guilt-free living, I was going to say, don't feel guilty about it. Let go of the guilt. But you know what I'm trying to say. Like, when guilt starts to creep in, remember that slowing down is self-care, and it's not lazy, and you're just giving yourself the time and space that you need to recharge. And so, remind yourself that rest is not the opposite of productivity. It is an essential part of productivity, because if you don't rest, you're going to burn out, you'll lose focus, you'll become less effective at what you do. And living slowly prevents that burnout. So try and reframe your thinking around that. And just trust the process, because I think you'll find that your life and your business and your work, it's still going to thrive when you choose to slow down and prioritize what matters most, because you're actually going to be better at creating sustainable rhythms for yourself, which is going to pay off in the long term. So I hope this episode was a bit of a brain wander on my part, but it was just, to dive into this idea that being slower in your approach to life is lazy, and just, let's get rid of that misconception, because it's not about lazy or avoiding responsibility. It's about choosing to live with intention and create space for what matters in your life that aligns with your values and that will support your well-being. It's not about doing less or being lazy. It's about being more intentional. And it really encourage you to reflect on your own relationship with maybe time or productivity or success. How often do you find yourself rushing from one task to the next, or chasing this idea of busyness as a sign of your self-worth? How might it feel to challenge that narrative and allow yourself the freedom to start slowing down and to not keep constantly striving to tick off your to-do list? And slowing down can feel real uncomfortable at first, because it is a shift, and hustle culture the hustle culture we've grown up in is so deeply ingrained in us, but the rewards are worth it. And so I just want to say thank you for your time today, listening to me unpack whether slow living and laziness go hand in hand or not. And I really hope that this episode has given you some tools and encouragement to start embracing a more slow and intentional way of life. And I would love to hear your experiences with slow living. Have you tried to incorporate any of these practices into your day? Are there any challenges you face when you're trying to slow down? Come find me on Substack. That is probably the best place. Each of these podcast episodes has its own post, so you can absolutely come check that out and leave me a comment there. Share your thoughts with me in the comment section of this episode, or if you want to share with me on social media, that's completely welcome as well. But you can find me on Substack at theslowlivingcollective.substack.com, and I am on Instagram at the Slow Living Collective. If you found today's episode helpful, and I hope you have, I'd be so appreciative if you could leave a review. Your feedback really helps me create more content that serves you and other people in this community. And if you leave a rating or a review, it also helps other people who are interested in these topics to find me as well. So that is always so helpful, and I appreciate that so much. And if you want to keep this conversation going, I've got a freebie just for you. I have the Busy Person's Guide to Slowing Down. It is a great tool to help you start integrating slow living into your general routine without any guilt, and it is perfect for people who live busy lives, like don't we all? But it is called the Busy Person's Guide to Slowing Down. You can find it on my website by going to theslowlivingcollective.com/busy-guide. That's theslowlivingcollective.com/busy-guide. That is a great little PDF, and you can digest it. It's all about slow, simple and seasonal living and how you can get started. You can also join my slow and simple workshop. It's a really simple 40-minute workshop intended not to take up all of your time and be something else to add into your day, but is a really easy 3-step framework to help you start reframing your thinking, reframing your mindset, and just thinking about how you can start to integrate slow and simple living into your life. You can also find that on my website by going to theslowlivingcollective.com/slow workshop. That is theslowlivingcollective.com/slow workshop. Like I said, it's just 40 minutes long. It will not take tons of time, and it's a really great starting point if you're looking to dive into slow and simple living. Thank you again so much for listening to today's episode and tuning in. I can't wait to connect with you over on Substack or Instagram, and I will catch you in my next episode.